What's up, best friends? My name is Brian Deach, and today we're going to tackle the topic UVM and a data fabric for security. With me, because I'm way out of bounds here, I have Michelle McLean, who is with Zscaler as well. Michelle, why don't you say hi to the audience?
Hello, glad to be here. Excited to talk about this topic. Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely. So where do we start when we think of the quote unquote data fabric for security? What does that really mean to you?
Yeah, I think the important thing to understand is that data fabrics have been around for a while, but applying it to security is new. And Zscaler is the first to do this and bring this to market. And a data fabric is not like a data lake or a data warehouse. It is transforming the data and making it more useful. And so you ingest data into a data fabric, and it does four key things. It harmonizes that data because it's not useful if different data points that are actually about the same thing are called different things. So it has to harmonize first. Second, it deduplicates the data. You're going to have lots of tools that report on the same asset or the same user, and you need to understand that there's only actually one asset involved. It correlates and understands information related to the same asset and pulls that together so that in the end, you have an enriched data set around all of your assets and your users and your vulnerabilities. And the key is that everything's in one place, it's dynamically updated, and you can leverage this and this, particularly the correlation and the enrichment, to deliver much more powerful security outcomes.
Well, I think you had my attention at harmonize, but I'm curious, like, I understand that there's data, right? But where do these data sources actually come from?
Yeah, great question. And the cool thing is that Zscaler is leveraging this data fabric across a number of solutions. And so the data sources will change based on the use cases and based on the solution that you're running. So today, I think we're going to dig into the unified vulnerability management solution. And so in this case, the sources are sort of in three main areas. The first is the fundamental vulnerability information. So people call this, QRT in terms of the classic scanners. That's Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable. And then the other thing you want along with that is threat intel. There's a list of vulns, and I have some of those vulns, but what I really care about is, are those vulns getting exploited in the wild? And so that exploitability information is also really crucial. The second layer of information, and actually this first layer is what most of the world works off of. Qualys gives me a score and I just act on that score. That's really limited because Qualys doesn't know your environment, doesn't know what risk means to you, doesn't have your mitigating controls. So the second layer that we bring in to the data fabric to fuel the UVM solution are other security findings. You've got your cloud tools, your asset tools, endpoint tools, your SAST and DAST tools. These are all finding additional security problems, gaps, misconfigurations that you're going to want to address. And it's really hard to rationalize, what is my cloud top 10 list versus my app scanner top 10 list? It's hard to rationalize that manually. And so you want a consolidated set of findings. And then the
Gotcha.
third,
Oh, I'm so
which
sorry.
really adds, oh yeah, no, okay. The third area that adds a ton of value is around business context. And this is the softer stuff. This is what has always required tremendous amount of, human intervention in Excel and Tableau and all of that. You want to know things like, what are the users involved and what's their behavior like? Is this area that we're talking about, this asset that we're talking about, or this app that we're talking about, is it in dev or is it prod? Is it sitting behind a firewall? You want to know things from maybe your CMDB. Like, is this actually tagged as a critical asset, a crown jewel? That's super useful. And you might have spreadsheets that list out, app owners or asset assignees. And you need that because after, of course, you've built a great prioritized list, you need to go get problems fixed. And so you need that information. So it's those three layers of information, bringing that all into the data fabric and then applying that correlation and enrichment to make sense of your environment.
All right, so I think I'm following along. So I only have like six things right here kind of listed, but there's probably a lot more than just those type of connectors. Is it about
Yep.
150? Is that what I read?
That's right. We've
Okay.
built 150 connectors, and that means that those data sources are ready to go and mapped in our model. But I also want to make the point, if you have data, we can use it. It's super easy to extend the data model at the heart of the data fabric and bring in any information point that's important to your organization.
Very flexible. And then RF is recorded future. I'm going to assume that's one of them. And so then I assume that we take in all these different things into the data fabric for security. And before I had a bunch of like these dots, like the scatter plot of information, and there really was no context as into what was going on. And I think what we do here is we map these dots out to kind of together to say, hey, like this is like a flow or a transaction. What would you actually call that?
These are the pieces of information related to the same thing. So I'm building a contextual, nuanced view of any particular entity. I'm doing that against my users, my assets, my apps, my vulns. And so it's not so much about a flow as it is a correlated set of information.
So it gives me a little bit of visibility. So let's kind of zoom in on the context. So when I get that, I assume I'm going to get like a rating, like high to low type of risk scoring. Is that what's going on?
That's exactly right. The first job in vulnerability management and remediation is, what do I fix first? And so having all of that stitched together, correlated context gives you much more confidence that you're going to be directing your teams to work on the most important things to fix.
Gotcha. So I'm going to come over here because context is key. And let's say I find like a normal CVSS right here. I'm gonna actually try to show it lower. So I have CVSS and it was like a 7.0. And the way that we help prioritize this is based off of other things outside of just that vulnerability. So it could be indicators like, hey, this is running in development, right?
Yep.
Maybe it has EDR running on it.
Exactly.
Okay, and
Both
then
of
there's
those elements would lower the risk associated with that given asset.
okay.
Yep.
And then I can also look and find out, because not all CVSS is exploitable, right? So some of them could be, some of them could not.
So yeah, maybe you have a second asset that has the same starting point. It's got that same score, but its situation is very different.
Okay. And I can focus user onto this as well, as well as data, correct?
Correct. You could overlay things like, yeah, is it exploited? Is there PII? Tell me something about this user, right? A lot of customers are running, know before or proof point where they're running phishing tests. And maybe one of your users flunks those phishing tests all the time. That's going to increase the risk associated with that particular vuln.
So let's talk about the remediation, because like we're looking at like a singular thing right here, but I'm assuming that it all kind of flows in together and there's a lot more than just one thing that we have to hone in on. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly. So you're going to have this sort of notion of a prioritized list, but you're also going to have that by group because you've got different teams that are solving different problems. Your Windows team solves those vulnerabilities versus your Linux team, for example. And so you see an example here of a screenshot out of the product where the right team is getting the right information. They can readily see what was the original score, what is that contextualized score. And when they look at those tickets, they're going to get a bunch of really helpful information. They're going to get, what is the fix? What do I need to do? They're going to get the rationale. You're going to see the math of how this risk calculation was performed. And the company set all that. They get to customize that. So we give them a starting point, but they can tweak that math as needed to fit their environment. So they're going to see the rationale. These are the factors that increase the risk. These are the factors that lower the risk. And have a ready understanding of what it is they need to do right now.
So this is great, right? I'm finding the risk and helping evaluate it and trying to prioritize. Is the level of effort, like how do I start to assign these things to the appropriate teams? Does it have knowledge in like my service now, or do I have to pick up the phone and call people?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's usually a lot of work in that handoff. I just talked to a customer the other day who's like, "Oh my God, it's all like Excel and emails, and we can't keep track of where things are. It's a nightmare." So yes, we will hand off automatically into like a Jira ticket or a ServiceNow ticket. To know who should get the ticket, of course, we're leveraging your data. So we need to know for that asset or that app or that vuln, who's the owner. And so we will work with the organizations to build those workflows because they do tend to be pretty tailored to the org, but we can absolutely automate that heavy burden of getting the right information to the right team to get the most important jobs fixed first.
So if I have something that's really pressing, I can understand the context of like, hey, this one would be for the endpoint team versus the identity team versus like the WAF team. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Which is all so very interesting. Three spaces in which Zscaler really doesn't historically play. And now we have the ability to kind of influence this based upon, I guess, taking all these different findings and vulnerability feeds and help prioritizing the risk. So yeah. I think the next question I have for you is, we've done this, right? The remediation hub, we're assigning tickets. Like, what are the metrics? How do we report on this? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's really important. So one important aspect of the ticketing system is that it is two-way ticketing reconciliation. So you always have up-to-date status. And then the reporting is really important. This is kind of the final piece of what sometimes people call operationalizing or mobilizing the information. You want to understand, how are my teams delivering against SLAs? How are we as an organization doing in our security posture? How are we today versus a week ago versus a month ago? So we have a number of out-of-the-box dashboards, reports that capture a lot of the information that we consistently see our customers wanting. But beyond that, it takes about 10 minutes to build a custom dashboard. Widgets any way you need them, metrics any way you need them, the starting point, the ending point, all based off of your organization's definition of that metric. And that kind of customized reporting is really valuable for getting alignment across the businesses, for getting executives up to date, and ultimately the board ends up caring about this. And so getting those kinds of board level reports out as well.
Could you enlighten me just a little bit? You said the two-way reporting. What does that actually look like? What does that mean? So I'm telling ServiceNow, and ServiceNow is coming back to me. Is that what that I'm looking at?
What that means is that we're dynamically looking for these vulnerabilities according to any scanning frequency that the customer sets. And if there's an open ticket, but our last scan did not show that that vulnerability still existed, we'll close that ticket. And counter, if we see that a ticket was closed, but we're still discovering a vuln, we will reopen the ticket so that the team has all the same context from before. And that time spent on just ticket reconciliation, it is often hours and hours in an organization, and we do it automatically.
So I'm starting to feel that UVM actually means like unstoppable victory machine when it comes to calculating risk and making life, I think, a lot better. Fascinating stuff. Once you bring us home, wrap it up, and we'll let these fine people go about their day.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, the goal is to just continuously shrink your attack surface. And that's what we really help you do. And working off of one data pool and one common source of truth, I realize that that's an overused term, but it's really crucial when it comes to this area. You want to have data-driven conversations. You want to be sharing the right information. There's often examples where somebody will hand over a list and say, these are on fire. You have to fix this. And the guy's like, I fixed that last week. Your data's old. You want to build credibility. You want to build trust. You want to strengthen the relationships. And breaking down the silos like this and working off of a common, dynamic, up-to-date data set really enables the whole organization across security and IT or app devs to really come to a new level of operational success.
Well, I think it's become abundantly clear you might be the smartest person that I know. Thank you so much for helping me tackle this topic. The data fabric for security. There's been data fabrics out there for a long time. This is the first one that's solely focused on doing security and UVM. So with that said, thank you for watching. Do me a huge favor. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, or not. I'm not going to know. But I appreciate you. Michelle, thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you.
Great conversation. Thanks.